as it's thinking. There we go. All right, we're recording. So welcome everybody. Just so you're aware that this session is being recorded for learning purposes. For those that can, if you wouldn't mind jumping on the Nearpod, I have that in the chat right down there. Expectations as we're going through the class here, make sure you're following along with the Nearpod lesson, using the chat tools respectfully and appropriately, and then also responding to questions and instructions the first time. So let me kind of go over exactly what's going on here. So today we're going to go over corrections, and this is going to fall into our next class. So the next class that we in this section. So this is broken up. You get, for the block class, you get a half a credit for the Intro to Criminal Justice class. And then we're going to have the second credit, half credit. So it'll be one full credit that takes care of your CTE certification. Will be our next block, and that's going to be on corrections. So we're going to have a brief introduction of that and what we'll be kind of going over a little bit. As we go in the class, remember, you can always hit the class recordings, which are on the front page right here. If you look at the view here, we have live class today. Your Unit 5 and Unit 5 reflection were due yesterday. If you didn't get those done, just make sure you get them in. I'll correct them when I get around to it. But you got to have everything done by the 18th, okay? And so we'll have that, and then we're going to start a new class. It'll be Thursday, the 27th, 2:15. We're just going to be going over corrections. So we have a whole class on that, and that will take care of your what's called your pathway. So you'll be a CTE pathway concentrator is what it's called. So you have all that under your belt. If you look under here, Unit 6 is going to go over, as I said, corrections. And so you have a quiz at the end of this, as well as your reflections that you've been doing for every unit. So that will be kind of it, and then we'll roll into the next block there. Okay, couple things. So corrections. Everybody loves the mug shot, right? So unfortunately, all the people that maybe we may idolize and look up to, like Iron Man, this was Iron Man back in the day, right? As he got in trouble. The Snoop Dogg. Does anybody know who this is right here? In the bottom right corner. Any guesses? Steve Jobs. I think that's Bill Gates, actually. Right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Bill Gates at the bottom there. Tim Allen, Home Improvement, up right here. Yep, a lot of people are. Justin Bieber, I'm sure you guys know him, right? A little bit, anyways. Nice mugshot. Hugh Grant. I'm not sure who this lady is. I'm gonna be honest. I know she's some actress, but there's a bunch of people that, yeah, maybe he was happy, or maybe that's not legit. I don't know. Anyways, this presentation was made by them, so it's kind of interesting. See who has maybe got in trouble with the law. But just knowing from like the history kind of portion of things, the prison system, which we're going to be going over in more extensive detail, all the way from starting it, like how you be indicted and get put into jail at first, and then go in prison if you're convicted, all of that stuff. So he says he's smiling because he's on drugs. Maybe, possibly. So it's changed a lot, right? And actually, prisoners have had a lot more rights in the years, and it's due to some kind of philosophies that have gone on. And we're going to go over those philosophies, what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to watch this video real quick, and then kind of go over some stuff.
Until the 1500s, prisons weren't a punishment in their own right, but used for debtors or as a holding place for criminals before trial or sentencing. Conditions depended on how much you could pay your jailer for food and bedding. Bridewell Prison was opened in 1553 as part hospital, part orphanage, and part shelter for vagabonds, but also a deterrent with harsh conditions. Similar houses of correction were extended to all towns in 1576. County jails were run by the local sheriff, but despite efforts at regulation by JPs and even Oliver Cromwell, by the 1700s they were still fairly awful places. Men, women, and children were thrown in together with serious and petty offenders, leading to bullying and overcrowded and terrible conditions, and with prisoners dying of jail fever, probably typhus and spread by lice. Between 1776 and 87, prisoners were held in rotting old warships called hulks with a 25% death rate. From the late 1700s, humanitarian reformers such as Howard and Fry lobbied for rehabilitation and better conditions as more criminals were incarcerated and the bloody code and transportation fell out of favour. By 1850, 90% of criminals were sent to prison, and the central government extended its control with prison inspectors and a National Prisons Commission. In 1842, Pentonville Prison was built along the lines of the separate system, housing 520 prisoners who spent 23 hours a day alone in their cells and exercised in masks to prevent human contact. Intended to give prisoners time for reflection, this led to high rates of insanity, delusion, and suicide. In 1865, the Prisons Act promised hard labour, hard fare, and hard board, forcing prisoners to spend hours a day on the treadmill, the crank, and shot drill. 1902 saw new principles for prisons with the abolition of hard labour and the introduction of borstalls until 1988, when they were replaced by young offenders institutions. In the first half of the century, shaved heads and arrows on uniforms were ended, and education, training, and paid work were introduced. However, throughout the century, the government struggled against the problems of reoffending, expense, and overcrowding, with 85,000 prisoners in 2010, and the Strange-Way Prisons riot of April 1990 highlighting ongoing problems with the prison system.
All right, so that was a brief history of kind of what has happened over time, right? So to be a prisoner back in a long time ago was not good, right? You'd probably end up dead, just because of the treatment. As you kind of heard there, I mean, there's sometimes that people would be in isolation, for all except like an hour a day or worse and stuff like that. So, but the goals of correction, there's four main things they talk about, okay? And this is what your quiz will. The first one is why are you correcting a person? The first one is retribution, right? We're going to talk about what that is, okay? The next one is deterrence, okay? So we're going to talk about that too, like not trying to show somebody don't do it or you're not going to happen. It's kind of like speeding, right? We get tickets to be more of a deterrent, so we will not do it again. The next one is rehabilitation, right? And then the last one we'll talk about is custodial. So retribution, what that is that those who support this goal feel that people who break the law do so on purpose and deserve to be punished. So the theory for that is there's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So people that it's kind of thinking along the lines of, and the hard thing is like you can't really get into anybody's head. You really don't know what anybody else is thinking. But are they really doing something on purpose, right? I think a lot of it is, if they are doing it on purpose, it may be like some mental kind of things. So you think of like a serial killer, for example, right? They're continuing to do it over and over and over again, right? A lot of people on instances like this want to take the tactic of retribution, right? It's like you've done so much to so other people, and that's not right. So we're going to do look at retribution. The next one is deterrence. Okay, so deterrence is the penalty that should exceed the true value of the crime in order to show people that crime does not pay. Okay, so I said Batman does not support retribution. And then also punishment needs to be made public. Okay, so there was a judge in one area for youth that committed offenses. What he would make them do for their punishment is he would use a deterrence tractives, and they would have to write on their board in front of them. They'd have to hold up a sign on a busy road saying, "I am a thief," on the sheet and something like that, right? or I shoplift, or something to that point. So it's like almost like publicly embarrassing them in order for them to not do something again, right? I don't know. I could see that there's a way to do that, but it's hard. I don't know. I don't like that. Yeah. So somebody said I would not want to see people punished in public. Yep. In some of these, we may feel like are kind of almost like inhumane kind of things, right? It's they're hard. It's like, what should a punishment be, right? And of course, everybody says the punishment should fit the crime, but kind of what to extent, right? So, and then also a deterrence thing is like you can go look up on public record. There's like websites out of there of who was arrested, right, in your area and who was booked into jail. It's made public record. So I know some people have said that they've gone on there before and they've found people that they know, right, that have been arrested, and their mug shots, right? You know how we looked at mug shots at the very beginning here? They went and looked at the mug shots there. So it's I don't know. This tactic is used and still used. The next one is called rehabilitation. Okay. Now, this one's considered the most humane policy out of all of it. The purpose is to change the guilty party so that they no longer need or want to commit crimes. So these are some uh, actresses, right, that have kind of actors and actresses that may have gone down the wrong path at some point in time, right? Um, and so this is kind of the most one, especially when we're looking at, Ronald Reagan. He made the war on drugs. So something that is kind of came up with that is like, what do we kind of put into rehabilitation, right? It's super, super expensive to basically prison all of these inmates. Would it be better for them to be on the outside and give them the therapy, the things they need to learn to be successful and not have to house them and basically provide for them, right? Because they did something like that. And a lot of people, there's a bad rap too, right? If you've been in prison, how are you going to basically get a job, right? Because everybody pulls background checks, right? And so if you're going to get a job, you're not going to get a good job, right? You're probably making minimum wage or maybe a little bit more. And does that even hit you over the poverty line? So they're looking at it and saying, oh man, I can't even make it in the world. But it was easier for me because I'm adapted to prison. They just go commit offenses and go back to prison, right? So I think it's a hard situation to figure out, and the United States incarcerates the most people in all the world. So it is an issue, right? But rehabilitation is another one. The next one is custodial. The goal is not concerned with the cause of the crime, nor is there any effort to change the criminal. So this one, what it is just, look, people are what they are. They have their nature. We're not going to do it. We're just going to put them up, right? We're just going to lock them up. We'll keep them there. They're out of society's face. When they're out, they're a nuisance to society. So we're just going to kind of, you know, throw you away almost, right? So that's not kind of a very humane thing either. But that's what we do with a lot of these people that can't seem to have the skills to socialize within society. Okay, so we're going to ask a poll question here. Um, which theory do you support out of all of these? Okay, retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation, or custodial, and why? So which theory do you support the most, right? Okay, so somebody said rehab. Okay, maybe put on there why. Why would you support that? And for those that can't do it, if you want to put it in the chat, that'd be great. Which one would you support the most? Rehab, since it gives them a chance, okay? Yeah, because some people are good people in bad circumstances. I'd agree with that for sure. Custodial, because sometimes you simply can't change people. Okay. Custodial, like serial killers. Okay. I hear you. Some people are just what do you do with some people, right? I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of people that have a hard time making it in society today, right? And they're just um not saying that. I mean, there's some people that are not, but they're causing issues within society, right? So rehab, because it's at least tied to give a person a second chance, changing their lives. Okay, so here's my thought on that too. What would you do if they got a second chance and they reoffended again? Because that happens over and over and over and over again, right? So how many chances do you get? Rehabilitation, because I think just throw them in prison, you can help. Okay. Retribution, unfortunately, most people are unlikely to change and only learn the best. Okay. Some people are given many chances for out, don't take it. Okay. Murderous custodial with them. Yep. And that's what it is for a lot of them, right? You hear that people are on death row for a long time, right? And just basically sit there. That's basically custodial, right? What we're talking about there. 3 strikes and you're out, somebody said. Okay. Rehabilitation to help. Yeah, and I think there's all different theories, and maybe it needs to be on a case by case basis where maybe some of these theories like would be beneficial depending on the individual circumstance. But some of them some of it's hard, right? Like it's hard to know what will work and what won't. So okay, so we'll be going over this a little bit more in some of the other classes as we move forward in our next block. But adult probation and parole. So basically, parole is trying to give that rehabilitation and get them back to a point where they can be successful. There's something called the Utah Boards of Pardons and Parole, and this is where they grant inmates the likelihood to be able to go out into society and try to adapt and finding a transition period there. So we're going to dig in a little bit more to prison life. Some things in prison life, the key element of prison experience is like classification of incoming inmates. Okay, so they do separate the inmates from like violent offenders to non-violent offenders. There's some that just can't be with each other. So if I were to commit like what's called a white collar crime, which is something that's not violent, maybe like stole somebody's identity or something like that, fraudulently did credit cards, I'd get put in a low tax fraud. Yep, that would be something as well. I would go into like a low security prison where it wouldn't be necessarily like is what it's talking about, right? But if I were more violent or some other offense like that, I'd be put in a more uh, more hardcore prison, I guess you would say, with other violent inmates. So it's interesting. What they do too to save money and to kind of give them a sense of purpose while they're in there. They all have different jobs. Inmates have jobs. Um, they basically are paid a small wage. However, they're not allowed to keep the money, but they can use the money for like commissary stuff to buy like I think a lot of inmates like cigarettes because they're probably addicted to it, right? And so they do anything for that. So things like that, right? Visitation is considered a privilege and it can be allowed or disallowed. Guards operate the prison, but much of the day-to-day stuff is made by the inmates, right? Like preparing the food and all that kind of stuff. It is interesting. There's like it's almost kind of like a dog eat dog kind of world in there. Who's ever the biggest, strongest, has the most connections, right? You would say that they have the most power, and those that don't seem to get kind of shaken down, right? But there is, you've probably seen like prisoners, they smuggle weapons and stuff like that into the like facilities, or they make their own weapons. So there's always searches that are going on by the inmates and everything like that. Trends and corrections, they have alternatives to jail, right? Or stuff like that, is like community service. You've probably heard of that before. Instead of sending them to jail because of all the overcrowding that's going on and how expensive it is to jail them, they'll look at just doing community service. And even when they're in jail or some stuff like that, they'll go out and do service projects, basically. So they basically have their wage, but there is some of their wage that's kind of taken away. That's due to like day fines. Uh, it's basically for more proportionate amount of like saying, hey, you live here, so you got to pay rent, right? And you're eating the food, so we got to do that. You got to do your job. We'll pay you a little bit, but you got to pay us for like the cost of all this. The size and locations of correctional institutions. The future jails or prison will probably be much smaller. What they're thinking is the future prisons will be located in the cities and suburbs where the inmate can locate a job easily. They can find recreation, schooling, and maintain like family ties throughout the time. Because they found out that actually sending a person farther away from good connections, good family connections, stuff like that, actually hinders their process of recovery. Restoration of offender rights. After years of good behavior, release of offender can start to like vote again. And also they can run for office, and they can erase their conviction record after a while. So there's been a lot going on there. I think especially in like the war on drugs, a lot of people have seen that as a bad thing, and a lot of people have gone to prison because of like marijuana possession or stuff like that. And now since they're legalizing it, now we're still punishing people for what is now like a legal kind of thing, right? Even though back then, so it's complicated. So prisoners' rights, basically prison officials cannot open letters addressed to their attorney, but an inmate can be prohibited from having a long hair. A cell can also be searched at any time for any reason. The prison is not required to pay inmates minimum wage. So, minimum wage is whatever it is. They pay a lot less than that. Let's be honest. So, okay. So the big question that we'll kind of talk about is, are you in favor or opposed to the most, I guess, retribution? We talk about retribution of the death penalty. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's a hard subject. It's been found most places that people think it's way too inhumane. But some people still think there's still circumstances where the death penalty should occur. So why don't you guys give me your thoughts on that? And after that will finish up this class for the block, and then I'll see you next block too for the next section of this. So what do you guys think? Are you in favor or opposed to the death penalty? Okay, so said, I don't think anybody should have the power to take anybody else's life. Okay, I don't think that we should take away a life. Okay, opposed. Life in prison, I think, is worse than death. That, pause for some people, yeah, for sure. In favor in cases of murder and armed for an arm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are some very serious and sick, I guess, people that have done some really, really bad things and taken other people's lives. So some people feel that way, right? It's hard. I think if you kill somebody or rape people, then yeah, I'm in favor, especially if the guy's proven very guilty. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like we talk about beyond a reasonable doubt, but we've learned like sometimes that some people just got in a bad situation and they actually didn't do it, and we put them to death, right? So it's there. No one should have to die. Yes, because people like serial killers have taken many wives and deserve to lose theirs too. Okay. The death penalty is needed. Okay. Killing someone for ding crimes won't make them right. Okay. Though some do deserve it, there are also plenty of people that get falsely imprisoned. Yep. And it would be unfair for a person to die for something they didn't do. Yeah. An eye for an eye. Oops. So I deleted the comment. Didn't see it. Okay. Well, it's a hard subject. I know. But anyways, thank you guys for being positive and being appropriate. I guess some of this stuff, because I guess some of it kind of heated and everything like that. So, all right, guys. So these are my questions. Let me just run over real quick. Once again, if any recordings, I'm going to post right to the announcement board right here. This is the last live class for this block. We will start up the 22nd or 27th in regards to the next criminal justice class. So I'll have that there. You got to have everything in this class done by block 1. I'm going to zero out grades probably fairly soon here, but you have unit 6 quiz and the reflection that you do. So if you go to unit 6, do the quiz. Here's some documents that may help you out through that, and then the reflection. So stick around if you have any questions. If not, I hate that when it does this thing. Okay. Why is it doing that? Okay. Anyways, that's all I have. Appreciate it. I'll stay after if you have any questions. So I'm going to stop the recording now.